Good morning, everyone. My name is Julius Austin. I am the Sacramento Promise Zone coordinator for the Promise Zone here in Sacramento, California. I want to welcome you all to an awesome presentation entitled Promise Neighborhoods and Full Service Community Schools. That might sound a little weird to some of you all who registered under the Choice Neighborhoods and Full Service Community Schools presentation. We just had a little change, a last minute change. So we want to apologize for that. But you all here, so there's no confusion. You are here. This presentation is part of the National Coalition of Promise Zones 2020 Federal Convening. There's been a lot of awesome presentations that have happened about over a 2.5-week period. So if you've missed any of those, we hope that you will be able to check those out. They are located on the Sacramento Promise Zone Facebook page and Sacramento Promise Zone YouTube channel. You can just search for Sacramento Promise Zone to find the presentations that have taken place already. But more importantly, let's kick off this awesome presentation. Before I turn it over to our awesome moderator, Dr. Michael Huff, who is a community liaison with HUD. He's serving as an awesome partner to the Sacramento Promise Zone. I want to just go over a couple of housekeeping items. One, I do want you to know that this presentation is being recorded. As I mentioned, the recordings will also be simultaneously aired over Facebook Live on the Sacramento Promise Zone Facebook page. We are asking that all participants please remain muted throughout the presentation. Though you will be muted, there will be great opportunities for you to ask questions or make comments in the chat box. Our moderator, Dr. Michael Huff, and some of our other members of our planning team will be monitoring the chat box to make sure that those questions and comments are being posed. There also will be some Q&A opportunities throughout the presentation and definitely at the end of the full presentation. We're fortunate to have two awesome folks who will be presenting to us. So there'll be two separate presentations. And so in between, intermittently in that, there'll be question and answer opportunities. So with that being said, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Michael Huff.
Thank you very much, Julius. You guys are in for a treat this morning, and I think it's still morning. Have a couple of education representatives, and education, as you know, going back to school and the things related to school and recovery from COVID-19 and all the other disruptions are something we really want to kind of highlight. We're very excited to have Elson Nash launching the program. We'll actually have James Guittard joining us later. Elson has worked in education and nonprofit for over 25 years. He started his career with the Carter Center, the first domestic initiative called the Atlanta Project. And before he started with them, he has served in various capacities in higher education at the local, state, and national level. He has helped work with social entrepreneurs in the US and Canada as well. And he's also been with the Corporation for National and Public Service, where he led a program, Learn and Serve America. His tenure with the CNCS was about 10 years, and he served as the Deputy Director for the White House Council for Community Solutions. There's so much more, but I just wanted to hit some highlights because I want to get him in. He has to leave a little bit, and I wanted to make sure he had time. So the key that you'll see with these programs is they're primarily place-based initiatives through the Department of Education, kind of focusing on a full spectrum of programming from cradle to career. And that's something that we'll be hearing a little bit more from him about today. Elson, please take it away.
So thank you, Dr. Huff. I'm going to try to keep this light and airy so that you all can remember a lot of key things. It kind of cracked me up when we had Julius up here with Silas, Michael, and myself. It looked like Run DMC and DJ Jazzy Jeff. So let's keep it light. Let's keep it fun. The important thing for you all to take away is that Promise Neighborhoods and full service community schools are programs that will enhance the work, the housing and community development work that you're doing out in the community. These initiatives really are the opportunities to round out the work that you all are doing through the Promise Zones initiative. I was a part of the planning of Promise Zones a few years ago. I definitely understand the connection and the need for Promise Zones, and of course their connection to opportunity zones. The importance of Promise Neighborhoods is that it is the education component. It's the idea of focusing on the neighborhood for population level change. And so with that, the grant funding for Promise Neighborhoods is significant when you talk about population level change. So grants for Promise Neighborhoods is approximately $6 million a year, dollar for dollar match for 5 years. So $6 million a year for 5 years. That's up to that amount. We funded over 60 communities across the country. Many of the communities are identified on this call, from San Antonio to Berea. We also have full service community school communities from Evansville to Indianapolis to Chicago, and of course Berea as well. We anticipate a grant opportunity coming up next year, but there actually could be a possibility of a grant opportunity coming up even sooner than that within this fiscal year. If that happens, the notice would be released in the next couple of months, and the turnaround would be 30 days. So I mentioned that just so that I put that on your radar, so that as you are thinking about all of the work that you're doing, there could possibly be a notice that comes out within this calendar year with a very rapid turnaround. We also anticipate next year for full service community schools. So think of Promise Neighborhood as neighborhood-wide, system level, population level change, whereas full service community school really is focused on the school district, where you're engaging 2 or more schools in wraparound services for your community. So as I talk about this slide deck, I want to give you that bit of information, that take-home homework as you work with your partners to start thinking about Promise Neighborhoods and then also full service community schools. Both programs you can actually use together. And our colleagues in Berea, Kentucky, and also San Antonio have done that quite effectively. So Promise Neighborhoods is a community change initiative. And as I mentioned, the specific goal of it is to prepare students for college, for success in college and careers from cradle to career. And that's an important point, from cradle to career. So we cover the full pipeline of supports for your communities. So as we talk about a community change initiative, in this context, we're talking Promise Neighborhoods as something that could literally change the broad spectrum of interventions in your community. The idea is to partner with all of the various partners in your community, government, churches, obviously your residents, and then other nonprofit partners to really encompass things like workforce development, education, public safety. These are all the types of things that I actually did. I was in your shoes back when I did the Carter Center Initiative in Atlanta 20-something years ago. So we look at this notion, the theory of change of Promise Neighborhoods. The idea of targeting those children who are in poverty and improving their conditions through education. We utilize what's called a results framework, and I'll tell you a little bit about that a little bit later, but the idea is that we're improving the conditions of the community through education. Obviously, we recognize that as one aspect of it, because tying education to housing and community development is also a broader notion of community change. But our idea is similar to the work of Raj Chetty and others. If we can change the zip code, improve the zip code from which a child is living, we can change the trajectory of their life and their outcomes. And so that's why we are focused on using this whole notion of a results framework and improving the system level outcomes of that specific community. So as you know, all of these elements need to be tracked in some way, shape, or form. So Promise Neighborhoods, once again, we encourage and actually require folks to conduct a neighborhood needs assessment and a segmentation analysis. This is actually a part of the application process, because we ask you for those types of things. Once a person is a grantee or an organization is a grantee, you set your performance results and indicators. Obviously, you would have your partners as a part of your application. You would be delivering those services with your partners. And then this whole idea of monitoring your performance measures and results indicators for continuous improvement is really a part of that system change. And in order to do that, we strongly encourage our grantees to have a case management system. Through that case management system, you can work not only within your organization, but across organizations so that you can identify those students who are at risk, and those students can be tracked so that you can support them throughout their cycle. The one thing I didn't mention was that Promise Neighborhoods is mirrored or is based on the Harlem Children's Zone model. We work closely with the Harlem Children's Zone. They actually have an institute there that you all can actually visit, and they do what's called opening the vault, meaning they share their assets, they share their knowledge as a part of what they do so that other communities can mimic the work that they're doing in Harlem. Think of us as the national funder for that model. So why is this important? Case management is linked, as I mentioned earlier, to the individual clients. So the idea being, if you can use case management in a way to identify those individual students, meaning those students highest of need, we can address the needs of those individuals who will then change the trajectory of that population. Because oftentimes what happens, and many of you have experienced this, those individuals who and students who have the highest needs are the ones that take the most time. And so if you're able to coordinate services in a way, in a comprehensive manner, you're able to increase the statistics related to those students who are highest in need. And I would say students and families. And as I mentioned before, the who it's the families, and the why and so what. Really, we look at the participants, we look at the needs assessment and segmentation analysis. That is actually what you use as kind of the basis of what you're going to do with Promise Neighborhoods. The actual system that you use is a case management system that will ultimately be tied to a longitudinal system as well. But the idea being, You're using this case management to identify the participants. You're using that information in a way that can cut across the systems and agencies. This is something that we did and we tested, like I said, years ago, 25 plus years ago when I worked on the Carter Center. And the reason it was so comprehensive was that if we, or partners, I say we, as if I'm back in the neighborhood, but if partners can work across agencies to identify families and address the needs, we're doing it from a comprehensive approach. We're using the best of agencies to address in a comprehensive way the needs of children and families. We're using a referral system that targets the population for those who need it most. And we're doing it in a way that is based on a theory of change and evidence. And I mentioned the evidence piece because those of us at the federal level, we talk about this idea of evidence-based interventions. And many of the interventions that you all propose to us in our applications are and should be evidence-based. One of the reasons why is because evidence-based interventions actually get extra points. And so as you all are developing your initiatives and your approaches, try to make sure that you have the research to back it so that when you do apply, you're able to say XYZ approach, XYZ after school program, or maybe teacher professional development, or trauma-informed care. All of these terms that many of our communities or our organizations use can be tied to evidence-based work. Obviously, it's important that that work be based around research, but it gives you extra points when you are submitting your application for our initiatives. So once again, one of the types of things that, as I talked about, this evidence-based solution, you're looking at the types of services, you're looking at the amount of dosage, you're looking at the attendance rates of your participants, and then the exit strategy to get them on to the next level. And so one of the interesting things that we've been able to leverage in our work at the national level, obviously we have partnerships with HUD, the Corporation for National and Community Service, agriculture, you name it. We work at the national level to figure out ways we can leverage our programs. But we also leverage our work with the foundation community. And so one of the foundations that we work closely with is the Annie E. Casey Foundation, because we recognize the work that we require our grantees to do is not easy. And so in concert with the Annie E. Casey Foundation, we develop a leadership program for our grantees. That leadership program is about 6 months. And pre-COVID, we would fly in our grantees 3 times a year over a 6-month period. And they would go through leadership development training through the Annie E. Casey Foundation. Not only the grantee, but their primary partners. And the reason being, we wanted our grantees, or we want our grantees to be trained in the results count, or the results-based accountability framework, so that they can speak the language not only with each other, but other members in the community, so that they understand what the results are. So when we talk about accountability and performance management, they will understand things like target levels. They'll understand things like intensity and dosage. They'll understand things like attrition rates and attendance and dropout levels. So not only are we saying that we will provide the funding, but we provide the necessary technical assistance for our grantees to be successful. So once again, one of the things that we really encourage our grantees to do as they talk about this results-based framework, program assessments, pre and post tests, observations, and other methods. The idea that you're providing specific data each year, that data really is based not only on the work of the grantee, but it's your partners as well. And so this idea of results-based accountability is not only accountable to the community, but as partners, you're accountable to each other. So this notion is critically important, that you assess what you're doing. And within that assessment, there are program assessments at the elementary and secondary level. There's also neighborhood assessments, because if many, if not all of our grantees conduct neighborhood level surveys. And those surveys are the way in which they're able to assess their impact. We help our grantees with that through technical assistance with the Urban Institute. But once again, this idea of being able to assess where you're going and what you're doing is critical to the success of the community. Being able to report back and say, here we are, here's where we did well, here's where we didn't do well. But the idea being is performance accountability is not a bad word, because in this sense, you're not only accountable to us as the federal government, but you're accountable to each other. And I think if there was any takeaway in all of this, I think many folks can do the work, but this idea of building the capacity so that the work that you're doing in your community is system changing. That's ultimately where we want people to be. We want you to be able to speak to the results that are in your community, hold each other accountable in a positive way, because ultimately we want everyone to be better off. So one of the things that I wanted to be able to do before I get off, I wanted to show you a video of one of our grantees, and that's the Northside Achievement Zone in Atlanta. I'm sorry, Northside Achievement Zone in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The reason I chose them is because the work that they've done is the work that's in the community that was and continues to be affected by the riots. That was the community that unfortunately has received a lot of the negative press. The folks at Northside Achievement Zone really worked to build up that community over a 10-year period. I'm not saying that they're now back at ground zero, but they're gonna be right back at a point where the infrastructure that they have as a result of Promised Neighborhoods, I believe that they will be back up on their feet much faster, because this is the work that they do. So I'm going to see if I can get this video going. In the meantime, if you all have any questions, Silas or Michael, I can answer questions while I try to bring up that video.
Thank you. Thank you, Elson. We did have a video, we do have a question.
Okay.
It's from Jeremy Evans. He asks, are you indicating that the full service community school grant is potentially opening back up soon, or the Promised Neighborhoods grant? Just a clarification.
The first one would be Promised Neighborhoods within this calendar year. And oddly enough, once again, all of this is based on appropriation. Full service would too. So next year, next calendar year and also fiscal year. Full service community schools will most likely have another competition because our 2015 grantees are rotating off. So even if we're at level funded, we'll have enough money for a competition. If we get additional money, which we've been getting additional money now for the last 3 years straight, we'll actually run a bigger competition. So it's actually both programs. Any other questions? Shoot, let's see.
Sorry, I was muted. The other question was related to opportunity zones. Do you have examples of how opportunity zones are meshed with this product program?
You know, offhand, I do not. I mean, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I have to get back to you on that. Let me get back to you on ways in which opportunity zones are meshed with our programs. We haven't had a priority around opportunity zones yet, but I anticipate we will in the not too distant future.
Okay. Do you want me to continue going with the questions?
Yeah, yes, please.
We have two questions. Are there any differing supports for students with disabilities in your programs? And do you work with OSEP?
Definitely, there are no differences in supports for students with disabilities. We definitely have to address the needs of students with disabilities, but there is no differences in supports. If a community deems that those students need additional supports, you're absolutely allowed to provide the level of support that's needed for students with disabilities. I'm not sure what's meant by you said OSEP?
I guess it's Office of Special Education Programs at the DOE.
Got it. Once again, if a program or community has special needs or supports for students with special needs, absolutely put it in the application and it will be allowed.
Excellent.
Any other questions?
Let's see. There's a follow-up question. Is the transportation providers at the table?
Excellent question. That is a, wow, timely question. So we've actually been trying to get additional partners at not only the national level, but through regional and state around transportation. If that came from our friends in Berea, Kentucky, we heard you. So just to let you know, absolutely, we're trying to address needs related to transportation. We've heard that many of our folks need that. We're trying to work those angles nationally and regionally. And in our upcoming program directors meeting in December, we will actually have some of those folks attending as experts to help work through transportation issues.
Great. And I just want to mention, I do see that James has joined us, and we will prep him for the next segment. Does it look like the video will launch, or is that something?
Yeah, I can launch it. We'll have about 6 minutes, which I think is okay for James, and then I will roll on off. And as I mentioned before, the reason I'm selecting it is because it is the Northside Achievement Zone. It tells you about the work of the Promised Neighborhoods in Northside. But I thought it was so appropriate given that they've provided the foundation for the work for that community that is affected by the riots. And so what they're doing really will be critical to that community getting back on its feet. So listen carefully about some of the things that they're doing, and that'll give you insights on the application that you will be writing for either Promised Neighborhoods or full service community schools.
Silas, is there a way to help get the volume for the video?
Let me
Elson?
see if I can pull the video up myself and control it on my end, because I can't control the volume on this side.
Yeah, so sometimes what happens is when the individual is using their headphones, the sound is coming through Elson's headphones. And so if Elson could take out his headphones and play it over your speaker, then that might allow the participants to hear the volume.
Can you guys hear it better? No?
Not yet.
Their ability to actually be
Is that
in harmony
louder?
and escape.
The problem didn't happen overnight. It's going to take just as much time as it did to create the problem to have a solution and what.
If you can maybe cut it all the way up, Elson, and start the
Okay.
video over.
Okay, sorry.
So the north side
You can start it over from the beginning.
of 33 community-based organizations and 8 schools. And we are working together.
It's
in a
okay to keep it from this
results-driven
point.
fashion, holistic approach to end multi-generational poverty, using education and home family support as the 2 levers. When parents don't have the proper resources at home, it contributes to children being unprepared for school. Problems with housing, employment, food, or health deprives a child of the proper rest or nutrition, which can lead to poor academic performance. When a family comes to NAS, we enroll them all to provide them with the support they need to solve these problems. The parents work with a family coach to help them set and achieve specific goals. The family coach gets them started in NAS by working with them to create their own achievement plan, which connects them to our parenting education and empowerment classes and to our 30+ partner organizations who support them to achieve their goals centered around education, housing, jobs, and time. At the same time, the student member recommend in their NAS course to set their own goals for success.
The volume has gone down, Elson.
Measure their success and make sure all the pieces are working together to support families as they lift themselves out of poverty and move their children along a path to college.
Hey, Elson, I have the video. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and see if I can use my volume for the group.
Thank you very much, Elson. I know you have to take off.
Hey, Michael. So I am going to have to get going. Folks can go to the website and they can run the information, run the video, which I think is really important. It'll give them a tangible example of what they can do in their communities. It's not something that needs to be a mimic. There might be elements of it, but it's just to give them an example of a real community that's doing this work and a community that's been in the news lately. Okay?
Thank you very much, Elson.
All right, thank you all. And I'm gonna pass it on to James and I have to hop off.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right.
So Silas, why don't we go ahead and defer to moving on with the presentation for James, and we'll make sure that the participants have the links to this video. But I wanted to get started with our next presentation. Our presenter, we're actually fortunate to have a person who we're having James Guittard. He's an education program analyst with the Department of Education, has an extensive history and experience with systemic education reform efforts, place-based initiatives, school choice, improvement programs, and especially family and community engagement. And so he's guided a number of provided technical assistance to schools, school districts, universities, and nonprofit organizations. And what's important is that all of his focus is on looking at the social determinants of health and showing how this initiative, full service community schools, can provide that comprehensive academic, social, health services for students, their families, and community members to kind of improve the overall educational outcomes for children. So with that introduction, I definitely would like to encourage you to go ahead and launch the program. James.
First of all, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be able to join you on behalf of my colleagues at the U.S. Department of Education, and particularly the Full Service Community School Program. I bring you greetings, and in the midst of this global coronavirus pandemic, there's even a dire need for us to break out of silos and to work cooperatively together across not only governmental agencies, but with the various organizations, school districts, and various educational stakeholders who are on the ground. So once again, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to join you today to discuss the various ways in which full service community school programs is looking at being able to improve the quality of education for children throughout our nation. With that in mind, I'm going to attempt to see if I can do a share screen to be able to provide you some of the information that we're going to discuss today. So let's see if we might be able to pull this up here. Tell me if you're able to see my screen or not.
Yes, that looks good.
Okay, then let's see now we can make it an entire screen, and we will be on our way. How's that for everyone?
Perfect.
Okay, excellent. So with that in mind, just providing a general overview of the purpose of the Full Service Community School Program, which is to provide support for the planning, implementation of full service community schools. There's a variety of different eligibility requirements that we'll discuss, as well as matching requirements. There's a video link that you see that you'll be able to look at your own leisure. One of the things that you'll find out about the model and strategy of full service community school programs is that the ethos of what makes it underneath its underpinning, there are a variety of different ways in which it's being implemented. There is a full service community school program model that's being implemented by the Department of Education, but various states, local education agencies, and schools often sometimes have their own full service community school model that's separate from the way that it's implemented by the Department of Education. A good example of that is in the Oakland inside California. The Oakland School District has a full service community school model that's similar to ours, but not exactly. And so what I want to do is be able to avail you as you try to understand the different ways in which full service community school approaches are being implemented, to be able to see them both from a federal government sponsored program and those that are not, and you'll be able to see how those different things intertwine together at times. So first of all, let's just look at just some background and general information about the Full Service Community School Program. The Full Service Community School Program provides support for the planning, implementation, and operation of full service community schools to improve the coordination, integration, accessibility, and effectiveness of services for children and families, particularly for children attending high poverty schools, including high poverty rural schools. So the approach to full service community schools is placing schools at the center of the reform effort, and then providing a variety of different support systems around that school to better be able to assist the child in their ability to be able to be academically and socially competent and to meet the various standards that exist within inside that particular state. Now, the full service community school program was reauthorized on the Title IV through the Community Schools for School Success section and provide the example. It's out of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Now, there's a variety of ways in which and strategies that are being implemented, which we often refer to as services that the full service community school program provides. It's a comprehensive approach both of academic, social, and health services working together to address the three core constituencies as defined by our particular program, which is students, student family members, and community members. And we actually track data as it relates towards how those services are affecting individually each one of those three groups as well as collectively. Now, in the process of doing that, we have basically a key set of services that our grantees have to select from that they are attempting to be able to implement. Those range from early learning programs and services, remedial education that's aligned with academic supports and other enrichment activities, providing students with a comprehensive academic program. They could select family engagement strategies that include parental involvement, parent leadership, family literacy, and parent education programs. There's mentoring and other youth development. There's community service learning opportunities. There's programs that provide assistance to students who've been chronically absent, truant, suspended, or expelled. Then we have other areas that are separate from just the direct education that's occurring within inside the classroom, as far as job training and career counseling services. We look at nutrition services and physical activities because we recognize that the lack of having nutrition for students is a detriment to their ability to perform academically. So we look at that. We look at primary health and dental care. We look at activities that improve access to and use of social service programs that promote family financial stability, mental health services. This mental health services, particularly during this coronavirus global pandemic, and the implication that it's having on the mental state of both families, children, and the communities is now becoming even more vital for our grantees who selected that as one of their core services that they'll be providing. Then we also have adult education, including instruction in the various forms of adults and English as a second language. Now, as it relates towards the providing of these particular services, there are certain guiding posts that all the grantees have. One is that they must coordinate no less than 3 existing pipelines and provide no less than 2 additional pipelines at 2 or more public elementary schools. So let me see if I can just break that down. So we have a list of services that a current grantee has to be providing separate prior to them even having applied for the grant. Now, of those services, they have to select at least 3 of those particular pipelines. Now, having established the fact that they have those 3 particular pipelines as a part of their application process, they then said that they would add an additional 2 pipelines to go along with the 3. That means each of the individual grantees in a minimum of at least 2 public elementary or secondary schools has a minimum of 5 services that they are currently offering. Now, some grantees have more than 5 services. And so what we also attempt to do is have them identify what are the most robust of their services. And so we keep a record of what are the top 3 most robust services of all the various services that they may be provided. We also keep information as it relates towards who's receiving those services. Like I said, we have 3 core groups. There's student, there are the children, the children's family, as well as around the community as a whole. And so what we do is we gather up data about how those services are impacting each of one of those particular groups. In addition to that, as a part of the data that's collected, they have to actually identify not only the services, who's going to be receiving the services, but then we have them set up target numbers for how many people would receive those services. We compare the amount of the target numbers of how many people are going to receive it versus those who actually did receive it. In addition to that, we have them explain what are the different levels of accomplishments that were achieved via that services, or various level of challenges that occurred in trying to implement those particular services. So what we're trying to do is get people from operating out of silos and having them to be able to work cooperatively together as it relates towards the integrating of the services, the coordinating of the services, as well as the various education stakeholders that they work collectively together with. So we're talking about coordinating and integrating services provided by community-based organizations and government agencies with services provided by specialized instructional support personnel. Each one of our full service community schools that are part of a grant must have a full-time, full service community school coordinator at that particular school who serves as the key person or a key point person to be able to help in the facilitating of the various services that are occurring. Now, in addition to the fact that they are receiving monies from the federal government, which I assume Mr. Elson-Nass has explained to you can be up to approximately $500,000 per year per grantee. The grant lasts for approximately 5 years, assuming that you meet adequately progress each year, meaning that a person who is a recipient of this particular grant is looking at getting an award for approximately $2.5 million. If they meet adequately progress for each of the years across the 5 years. And during these timeframes of various budgetary cuts that are occurring in our various school districts and local schools, this becomes a sizable form of money to be able to implement a variety of different strategies, and it also serves as a vehicle to determine whether or not is this particular approach something that there's a great enough level of buy-in to then have scalability within inside the district to further invest within that. As a part of that, we also require that grantees have matching. Now, the thing about our matching program is the fact that it is not matched dollar to dollar. What they have to do is just indicate the percentage that they will be matching. That's taking into consideration during the course of the grant application process. So with inside federal legislation, it does not say exactly how much the match must be. It just states the fact that there should be a match, and that match must consist of various cash or in-kind services that are being offered per year. There are some cases where a grantee may use their very first year as a planning year. It's very limited those who actually choose that path, but it can happen. So applicants under this program may use no more than 10% of the total amount of the grants funded for the planning purpose during the first year of the grant. So that we're talking about, that's basically $500,000. 250,000. Funds received by grantees during the remaining of the project period must be devoted to program implementation. So we have in some rare cases where a grantee may use part of their first year to further work through the various theories of changes, approaches that are connected with the full service community school program and how it will be actually implemented with inside their particular school system. Now, along with that, we have various grant priorities. Now, what I'm discussing now is not so much from the perspective that of the grantees who have already received grants as it is if we were having a grant competition. So there's only one absolute priority, and we have 4 competitive preference. The absolute priority is from, and has the reference point inside ESA, and we also provided the competitive preference points and where they're located if you would like to actually look in the ESA legislation to better to be able to understand what those are. What I'm going to do now is just discuss them, but before I provided at least a reference point, if you would like to get additional information concerning them. So the absolute priority is as follows. Projects will serve a minimum of 2 or more full service community schools. If you recall earlier in my comments, I said that at a minimum, grantees must already have established doing at least 3 minimum pipelines. In addition, they have to pick up additional 2 pipelines. So they'll be doing 5 pipelines. And what the absolute priority says is that those 5 pipelines have to be being implemented in at least 2 or more full service community school programs. So that's what the absolute priority is. And to meet this priority, applicant must propose a project that will serve a minimum of 2 or more full service community school programs eligible for a school-wide program as defined in the notice under section 1114B of ESAA, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, as part of a community or district-wide strategy. Now we'll discuss the various competitive preference priorities. So as you can see, there are 4. The 4 competitive preference priorities have a different amount of points that are associated with potentially to be received during the grant application process. They range from 0 to 2 as it relates to a rural district, small or rural and low income. Broadly representative consortium, 0 to 1 point. History of effective, 0 to 1. Evidence-based activities, strategies, or intervention, 0 to 5. So 2 of them you can see broadly representative consortiums or history of effectiveness. It's either you have it or you don't. It's only as it relates towards rural districts, small and rural and low income, as well as evidence-based activities, strategies, or interventions, do you actually have the ability to not fully have met the priority, but have met it to some degree. Now, this is additional information, and I don't want to overly spend too much time on the various preference priorities, but I just wanted to be able to give you just a general overview. This will be a part of the PowerPoint presentation if you'd like to reference back to it. And what it does is it basically walks you through the various criteria that make up how you receive the competitive preference priority 1 point as it relates towards rural districts. And so it's something that's not determined by the Department of Education. It's actually determined by a separate office. It's the Small Rural School Achievement, which is the SRSA program, or the Rural and Low Income RLIS program. They actually make the determination of whether or not you actually meet their definition. And based upon whether or not you meet their definition, that determines whether or not then you can meet the competitive preference point, and whether or not you meet both or you meet one. There's additional information about the eligibility requirements that you can also find out that we made available for each of the various programs. We also indicated in that LAA includes the public charter that's operating as LAA can also meet this particular criteria, and it gives additional information on how that would transpire. Now, what we recognize is that depending on what direction that a proposed applicant may be attempting to meet this particular criteria, there's certain key information that they need to take into consideration. One is if an LA is eligible for an SRSA award, only if the total number of the students in average daily attendance at all of the schools served by the LA is fewer than 600. Or each county in which a school is served by the LEA has a total population density of more than 10 people per square mile, and all the schools served by the LA are designated for school locality code of 414243 as determined by the Secretary of Education. Or the LA is located in the area determined to be of a certain form of rural designation. There's a different criteria as it relates to the RLIS award, which means that at least 20% or more of the children ages 5 through 17 years old are served by a LA are from families with an incomes below the poverty level, as well as they're meeting the definition concerning school districts that are within rural locations. So with that in mind, we go to the next form of preference priority, which deals with broadly representative consortiums. And the Secretary is determined to give priority to any applicant that demonstrates that is a consortium comprised of a broad representative of various stakeholders. The definition of what is a broad representation is not specifically defined, but what you should think is that it is an amalgamation of a variety of different key stakeholders that would impact the various constituencies which we've identified, which are a student family members, and the communities, and how perhaps those different stakeholders work collaboratively together to be able to make a difference and change as it relates towards the children and their ability to succeed academically. History of effectiveness. The secretary gives priority to an applicant that demonstrates that a consortium is with a history of effectiveness. This basically is a benefit for those grantees that have previously received often federal government funds and can then therefore be able to demonstrate the effectiveness for how to utilize those funds as it relates towards this particular purpose to which they're applying. But it's not limited to that of grantees to a federal government fund, but often those are where those are the areas for which people often show their history of effectiveness. Now, the evidence-based activities, strategies, or intervention. The secretary gives a priority to an applicant that is supported by promising evidence. So in order to be able to even assess this particular area during the course of the grant competition, what we have is peer reviewers who have a specialty in evaluation. And this particular section is evaluated primarily by the person who has that specialty in evaluation. And each panel during the course of the grant competition has a designated person who has a specialty in evaluation, even though some of the other peer reviewers may also have various levels of expertise in evaluation, in order we might be able to assess the competitive preference priority number 4. Now, the reason that we need that is because the definition of promising evidence is something that, depending where or who or what, may have various forms of definition of promising evidence. For the purpose as it relates towards this program, promising evidence means that there's evidence of effectiveness of a key project component improving a relevant outcome based on a relevant finding from one of the following: a practice guide prepared by WWC reporting a strong evidence base or moderate evidence base for the corresponding practice guide, right? As you know, is the Western Clearinghouse is the WWC. Next, it also has, as part 3, a single study assessed by the Department of Education as appropriate. There's an experimental study, a quasi-experimental design study, or well-designed and well-implemented correlation study with statistical controls for selection, which is based upon a variety of different factors, ranging from a study using regression methods to account for differences between a treatment group and comparison group, and includes at least one statistically significant and positive favorable effect on the relevant outcome. All these are various forms of factors that are considered in determining whether or not a grantee has a project that has promising evidence. Now, we kind of alluded to, and this is kind of a restatement in light of everything that we've already discussed, for you to be able to see once again the various eligible services that we earlier mentioned. This is just to give you an opportunity to see those again, because this is now, having heard some of the information that you heard, you can better see how different grantees may have different levels of focuses. And it's based upon how do they work collaboratively together with at least the minimum of the 3 services that they already had, the 2 additional services they had. So they have 5 of these eligible services that they're implementing, and they're implementing them at least a minimum of 2 schools. So those are some of the services there. Okay, now we're going to just additional forms of requirements. You have to have a description of the needs of the eligible entity, basically a needs assessment that allows us to better understand why you even would need the grant. You have to have a memorandum of understanding among the various partner entities that will demonstrate the fact that you're coordinating and providing pipeline services, that, as well as it describes the various roles that the partner entities will assume during the course of the grant. Description of the capacity of the eligible entity to coordinate and provide pipeline services to at least 2 or more of the full service community schools, which you've already alluded to, and an overall comprehensive plan that includes a description of the following: the student, the family, the school community to be served, and the demographic information associated with that. The needs assessment. And the needs assessment looks at various key areas. Obviously, most importantly for us is academic. But we look at the academic, physical, non-academic health, mental health, and other needs of student families and community residents. Taking into consideration in particular, as relates to academic performance, annual measurable performance objectives and outcomes, including an increase in number of percentage of families and students targeted for services each year of the program. For the various pipeline services, including existing additional pipeline service to be coordinated and provided by the eligible entities and partner entity. So we really do try to basically have a needs assessment that lets us get a chance to understand what are the various issues that exist. Then we're looking, in light of those various needs having been identified, we're looking at various strategies that are going to be implemented to be able to address those needs. In addressing those needs, you'll pull from a variety of different services that have already been pre-identified. And then we want to be able to see is how those various services that are part of those pipeline services are working collaboratively together in order to bring about change. And do you have both a target number that you're trying to be able to meet? Have you met that target number, and what has been the outcome of being able to do that? Right, and obviously with that, this needs to be occurring in a comprehensive strategy inside a school-wide program. Now, we only have one GEPR. Many programs sometimes have a variety of different GEPR measures. Ours is the percentage of individuals targeted for service who receive services during each year of the project period. So what we now have done is we report to Congress the all three numbers of student family members, and community members together in the aggregate, but internally within the program, we disaggregate that so we can better understand who's getting the services from which particular grantees, in order we might be able sometimes to partner them up with other grantees that have issues or circumstances to better be able to help them with. Give me one brief moment. It appears my battery, my computer is going a little low. I don't want it to interrupt our presentation. Okay. Is everyone hearing me clearly? Michael?
Yes, James. Let me just interject a question while you're doing that. The question is, can a grantee hold more than one FSCS grant?
Yes, they can, but only one per each cohort grant competition. But for example, let's say take a sizable school district. So sizable school district A applies for a full service community school grant using schools 1, 2, 3 in one grant application, and then any separate grant application applies for 4, 5, 6. They can be rewarded separately for each one of those particular separate applications. It is likely, however, that they will only receive one award for that particular cohort for that year. But let's say if they applied for it in 1 year, and then in the next year apply for a different set of schools, which we have had people do. And so we have at least one that comes to mind. Perhaps we have 2 currently, but at least one that currently right now has 2 different full service community school grants that cover 2 different sets of schools. And sometimes what it may be in a case is that the first time that they wrote the application, they covered the elementary schools, and then the second time that they wrote the application, they covered the middle schools, or they may choose an entire different set of schools. Is that helpful, Michael?
Yes, thank you. I guess that kind of answers the question, can a grantee hold 2 awards in different financial years?
Yes. We addressed 2 issues at one time.
Okay, perfect. If you want to go ahead, you can continue, and I'll.
We're going to just, and at any particular juncture, this deals, we're almost concluding. So what you have right here is, this is just an outline of the various components that make up our grant application. Right? An abstract narrative, project narrative, budget narrative, many of the things that you're well acquainted with. An appendix, resume of key personnel, memorandum of understanding. That's becoming very, very important, being able to better identify what are the relationships amongst the various education stakeholders, documentation of the match, whether or not it's cash or in kind, and there's a variety of different governmental forms that are required, as well as assurances. What you have here is just to give you an understanding of the program and its funding that has transpired and the amount of grants that we are currently operating. What you also see is that that the amount of grants have fluctuated at different timeframes, the amount of grants that we had. So it started off with just 10 grants in 2008. And you can see that for 2008 and 2009, it was in 2008, there were no new grant new grant award in 2009. So you see for 2009, it just has the continuation award. So you see 2008 and 2010 are the first two times that the grant had actually grant competitions. So you go 2008, it took 2 years before the grant had an additional grant competition. Until that time frame, it was just doing continuation awards. Then you'll see that there was no grant competition from 2010 all the way to 2014. There was a 4-year lag where there was no grant competitions. It was just a continuation award. But then you'll see a change that occurs after that. In 2014, there were new awards. In 2015, there were new awards. And while you don't see 2016 and 2017, there are no new awards. But what you see is in 2018, we just had new awards again. 2019, we had new awards. And then we're going to talk about 2020. Now, for 2020, we will have new grantees, but instead of there being a new grant competition, they had with a terminology, which I'm assuming many of you are acquainted, which is called funding down the slate, which is instead of actually having a new grant competition, they looked at the funding slate of who actually got awarded. And then based upon that, they went back to that funding slate, felt that they had a good enough level of additional grantees who did not receive funding that were meritorious perhaps to have received funding. So instead of having an entire new grant competition, what they did is they funded down the slate, and that created a new set of award. Those are the grantees that we now have now. So what we have is for this particular fiscal year 2020, there was $25 million, and we will have new awards. We will have 19, which means that our program that started off at 10 awards has now grown to now 35. So we've had over a 300% increase in the number of grantees that we have. The period of performance is up to 60 months, which is 5 months. The maximum award is $2.5 million for an entire project period. The average size of the award runs about near $450,000. The maximum award is $500,000 per year. Right. This is just some additional information just to be able to have about certain key requirements that we have concerning professional development, evaluation. They have to demonstrate plans for sustainability. They have to show us assurances that the eligible entity and its partners will focus on the services as they prescribed, and it was connected towards a school-wide program. And remember, I indicated they must hire a coordinator for each school participating at a site. The coordinator has to be at a 100%, a full FTE. There's not a direct reference here in this particular slide deck, but the fact that each grant has to have a project director, and a project director must be at least at a 25% threshold of an FTE. Now, these are just some of our more robust grantees that are doing very interesting work. In remedial education and academic enrichment services, we have Berea College, and it talks about the various ways students have an opportunity to participate in a plethora of tutoring and after-school programs that range from recycled art to outdoor activities. It discusses the various programs that they have in engineering and mathematics, and you can find out additional information about Berea College and its full service community school program on our Department of Education website. The same thing as it applies towards the various remedial education programs that they have. They also have a rather in-depth family parent engagement list for leadership and education programs. And what we have is some examples of what they have, which is called a certified FAST site, which is about family and schools together. And it's a way of trying to be able to implement how to be able to be better advocates for parents and providing them with the various school skills so that they may be able to interact with both schools and school districts and the various issues as it relates towards their child's academic progress as well as social and emotional needs. United Way of Buffalo, which is an example of, Michael, of a grantee that has already received an award, and during this new 2020 cycle was awarded an additional grantee, additional award. They are probably one of our strongest in family parental engagement. They have one of the largest number of collection of various education stakeholders that are working collaboratively together to bring about various forms of programs and initiatives that address specifically family parental engagement, literacy, leadership, and education programs. They also have a rather expensive mentoring program that goes throughout the Western New York area. And so there's additional information that you can find out also as it relates towards them and their teacher-child interaction training for kindergarten and first grade teachers, as well as staff members, that takes into consideration various cultural sensitivity issues at the same time, and the management of children who may have difficulty in attention and attention deficit issues. Columbia College in Chicago focuses on early childhood education, and they have a holistic literacy instruction that they're trying to be able to implement. And particularly there's a program called Story Bus, which is a children's literary museum on wheels. It visits various participating schools and provides an enriched pre-K kindergarten literacy program. You can find out more about that, as well as remedial education and academic enrichment services that they're offering throughout the summer, and now how they're attempting to be able to offer these particular remedial education and academic enrichment services via a digital platform. And so they're doing a variety of different creative ways of doing this global coronavirus pandemic to be able to address some of the same needs, but finding a different vehicle for how they may be able to do that. And based upon that, a substantial amount of our time frame right now is actually reviewing budget modifications to take into consideration the various challenges that places have, as some school districts or schools may be implementing hybrid models of how they're providing the educational services and instruction. Some are doing it in-house, and a lot are also doing it totally remote digitally. And so we still want for people to have the benefit of these wraparound services. And so we're looking at a variety of different ways to examine with grantees their budgets in order that they maybe acquire different forms of additional software that they may need to have and make accessible to students and families to be able to access creative ways to receive some of the various forms of services that they were previously receiving via remedial education. With that in mind, I want to say thank you for the allowing me the opportunity to be able to share a few information concerning the full service community school program. Mr. Elson Nash serves as the team lead for the program, and I would be his senior staff member to be able to help work out the majority of the issues that fall inside our purview. With that in mind, I'll turn it over to you, Michael, for any questions or comments that you may have as it relates towards our program.
Thank you, James. This is really, all the things that you guys have provided today have been really timely, you know, especially with how we're trying to adapt to the virtual reality that we have for schools and for the neighborhoods that really need these resources as well. I don't see any questions yet, but we'll give people a couple of minutes. I just wanted to ask you, are there examples of these full service schools that we could find related to maybe the West Coast and the Midwest and South?
Yeah, so if you recall, what I would do is there is the YMCA in Long Beach. YMCA in Long Beach has a full service community school program. We have about 3 active, I think, grantees within the particularly California part of the West Coast. What I would do is visit the Department of Education's website, because we have some new grantees that are just coming aboard, and we provide information about the specific locality of each one of our grantees, as well as contact information for those particular grantees, so that you may be able to reach out to them. And also don't limit it, if you recall in my earlier comments, I stated the fact that while the theory of change of full service community school program is being implemented by the Department of Education, there are entities that are outside the Department of Education that are also implementing full service community school programs. They may have a different forms of requirements than we may have, but the overall impetus is still having schools at the center with wraparound services that support the social academic needs of students. And so I would avail yourself also to, like I said, the example I shared via the video link concerning what Oakland is doing and how their approach is, and then I would try to merge the benefits of the various ways in which grantees are attempting to implement this strategy.
Can we, can we find maybe some examples on your website as well of the best practices of how it's adapting to virtual, what agencies or school districts or grantees are adapting? Because I think that's going to be part of the question that a lot of our attendees have going forward for the foreseeable future. Any suggestions on where to look for that?
Well, I guess the key word is best practice, Michael, right? We would suggest some level of evaluation that may have transpired. And because things are so relatively, new, the whole definition of best practice is rather elusive, right? Now, if you say whether or not, are there a variety of different grantees that we see perhaps potentially levels of work that we think potentially could result in potentially promising evidence, I think that there are some of that. It has not been placed on the Department of Education's website because of the particular issue that I just described, as far as has it undertaken a certain level of evaluation. What we will, while not right now, because I think it's so new, what we will do is we will make available to people the different grantees and who have been willing to share with who we see as some, let's say, our more seasoned grantees, who we've had a longer relationship with, as you inquired and pointed out, the fact that could a grantee have more than one full service community school grants? So we have grantees that may have been awarded a grant in a previous cohort, and we've seen the sustainability efforts of that. And so while we can't say per se that it is best practice, what we can say is that they have a more extensive experience in this area, and they may have even have had certain experiences already in dealing with issues remotely. I think that's a more accurate reflection of what we have.
That's great, and you're correct. I actually thought of the word, after you mentioned best practices, innovations, innovative ways to kind of maintain the services that they have, and we'll definitely keep looking for that. And I'm sure some of the larger ones, the ones who have that capacity and sustainability, will be demonstrating that as we go forward.
So I would look at some of our grantees like the United Way of Buffalo, and I think it also depends on what type of services that are being offered, right? I would look at United Way of Buffalo, Homewood, Children's First in Delaware, right? These are some of Berea College. Berea College is a major player in both place-based initiatives via both full-service community school program as well as the promise zone area. And so we know that they're doing a lot. And I think one has to dig deeper in and see whether or not is their approach, does it match your particular demographics and constituencies, as well as the particular needs, that you may have, because sometimes people are able to do more because they may have more partners that are working collaboratively with them that other people may not have, right? And so you have to take that into consideration. Or there may be additional levels of funds, let's say districts that are providing Chromebooks to all of their students, right? It opens up a whole new plethora of opportunities of ways in which you can provide services versus a place that is struggling to make sure that they even address the technical divide, right? The digital divide in different ways. So I think you have to kind of like look through that, look at what type of support services they have, how long have they been doing it. And I think in many ways, it's going to be like stay abreast. I think your question will be even better able to provide guidance. I'm going to say, why don't we give it to like January or February? Let's see what happens during this August through December, what happens? And then come back to that same question and say, okay, tell us, what do you think?
I agree.
Touch base with.
I agree. I think we'll have some good examples, some things that work and some things that don't work.
Right, and we'll have some surprises. We'll have some people who we didn't think was going to do that great, and we have some people who we thought, they were the one, but it turns out they actually weren't. Right? We'll see. So, James, we've basically come to the end of our time. I don't see any other questions. I think people are really digesting this, and some of the feedback, they're very interested in taking advantage of these opportunities. So thank you so much for, alerting us to this and helping the Promise Zones, especially at this time, to add this information. And, we really appreciate you guys, and I'm sure we'll be reaching out. Well, first of all, once again, on behalf of our full service community school program, in particular, Mr. Elson Nash, who serves as our team lead, definitely see us as a fellow partner, as individuals who are doing this very important work to improve the quality education for children. And so to the extent that we can work collaboratively together and be able to share both resources and ideas, we're definitely open to it. And we always look forward to being able to be supportive of the initiatives that you're currently undertaking. So let's stay in communication, and to everyone who's present during today's call, even though I didn't hear your voice, know that we support the important work that you're doing, and definitely be safe out there.
Thank you very much. I'll turn it back over to our moderator, Silas.
All right, everyone. Thank you for participating on today's workshop session. We're glad that you were here. Hope you received some information that was useful. We will be sending out information to the everybody who registered, and if you did not, please send us email. For those who know me directly, you can send the email at silas.matcham@echohousing.org, and we'll make sure that you're informed with all the presentation information that we have for this federal convening. We do have one more left coming up right after this at 1 p.m. Central Time, and the various other Pacific and Eastern times. So please join us for our last one going out. And we look forward to connecting with you in the near future. With that being said, I'll be ending this presentation. Thank you for coming.
Take care, everyone. Have a great day.